All right, so for today, we are talking about Mozart, Marriage of Figaro, Overture, the Strauss, Heldenleben. The biggest excerpt you'll get from this, which is number 9, followed closely by the battle scene, is the next thing you'll get. You'll get all kinds of stuff from Heldenleben, but number 9 is the heavy hitter. And then Shostakovich 5, first movement. This is the number 1 spot in all of Shostakovich 5. That being said, if you can get your hands on a part to Shostakovich 5 and start practicing it now, that's good because it's really, really hard and it's really long, and it's the kind of thing where if you have a week, it won't be enough time. Because Shostakovich 5 is really, really long and all the movements are really challenging. It'll take like a month plus to get together. Let's go in kind of chronological order. So let's go and start with the Mozart. Right? The key here is contrast, as always, and kind of stay in your lane all the time, right? So if you have the copy of what I showed you, there are a couple of changes that I've made over time. These bowings are from when we did it in a run. We did it in rep at Boston University. And the idea here was, like, we made this change on the first page in the effort to keep things longer and the lines a little bit longer. So starting out here allowed us, we were really confident. It was a small section. Everyone was nice and tight together, so we were comfortable doing, right, and starting up. But for the most part, 99 times out of 100, it's going to be a down bow start, right? It's just going to be, that's how you'll see it in your excerpt books. That's how you'll see it is, right? That's that's more clear. But we wanted, feels great on the down bow, right? Because you're pulling, you're going with the arc of the bass. Right? You're able to use the crossing. And then, sorry. Is how I go at the end, right? The only weird thing is flipping around. In measure 6, I like to get first finger down on that C sharp so that I can, as much as anything else. So that's, and then 2, 1, 2, 2, 4, and then 1, open 1 is that's the part where it's hardest for me. But being able to get to is really more important for me, right? Whatever fingering you choose, the most important thing is that it's smooth, right? That the crossings not be heard, and that it be undisturbed, right? The whole thing should feel like one. And it should all feel like one big down bow. If you could do it a little louder, one big bow, you should, probably. Because that's the idea, right? Having it super, right? It's the ultimate team sport moment because everyone has to start right on a dime, right together, and stay together. And you're not really contributing your individual sound to everybody. It's more you're just making the hum, and if everybody plays double piano, it'll eventually get out there, right? The circumstances are different if you're in the pit, right? Or if you're playing in an audition. You have to, this is one of the trickiest things to do is not just for bass, but this is a huge one for bassoon players, right? Is coming into a hall and feeling that space for the first time and then deciding what double piano is, right? Is in a big space, that might be double piano, right? It has to be double piano to someone who's on the other side of the room, who's behind the screen. So you have to kind of guesstimate what that's going to mean. It's no longer cumulative. When it's just you have to change what that dynamic means, right? It's double piano might be something, this would be mezzo something in the orchestra, but that might be, right? If that is going to translate and get over and allow that clarity to come out, then maybe a more resonant sound is going to work in a larger space, right? If something's really dry, then you want to kind of compact it and stay more in your space. But, or I mean, if something is really boomy, if something's really resonant, right? You want to bring it all back and try not to overpower the room and get it all ringing. But if a room is really dry, you can sort of play into that sound and make sure that it's filling sort of the back half of the room as well, right? Then immediately, right, assuming you get out of the lick untouched, right, the next thing you have to think about is subdividing and contrast, right? You've gotten out of I desperately need a rehair on this bow, so let me throw a little bit of rosin on, right? But this is going to click immediately, and I'm in tuned down solo strings, but it's going to click immediately into a sort of saute, right under the balance point, light, and you don't necessarily need to leave the string, but the bow and the stick need to flex against each other, if nothing else. At a slower tempo, it can leave the string, right? Right, as that speeds up. Somewhere in there, because this is going to go really, really fast, and it's at the very edge of where I can hit saute, for me, personally. If you have a lighter bow or you're just better at it, then... Right, I should be getting a little bit more height, a little bit more distance there, but I need a rehair, tune down, so a couple of other things, right? It's a little tough for me, but you want maximum contrast between... Right, you can't dig it in, but as much loud as you can get that has this kind of aesthetic, that's a little bit almost pecky and a little more vertical is what you're aiming for, right? The main stuff comes back, it's all the same, right? And then we have tutti bassi underneath. Take a look at 41, 42, right? You're going to need to plan out your retake. Think of this as more of a half note, right? So from 40, right? It's so fast, just drop that tie, so you make sure you're on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for this, take a look in the left hand, find the spacing for da da dee da dee da dee da, right? You have two hand shapes here. Try to find the space where you can keep your elbow in one space. Normally we would go, if it was just one shift, the whole thing would move. Isolate this shift a little bit, and then find the point dead in the middle of those, and then you can make the whole shift with just sort of the elbow. And that'll allow you to go faster, right? If you go ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and you're moving the whole shoulder, you won't make it in time. You can move along this axis much quicker. So find that shift from D to A, and then find a way to do it without moving at the shoulder. So my shoulder can more or less stay straight, which gives you, right? The shoulder isn't doing the work, it's all underneath. I found that's the closest I was able to get. I was never able to get the string crossing as well, or this was idea 2, but I was never able to get it to where I liked it. So I ended up trying to go down the string, right, and do it that way. Just the first way that it would occur to you ended up being the one I liked the most, right? Let's go flip the page, looking over to the next stuff, right? Everything's pretty okay, you're humming along, right? And then you get to this development section. Don't be fooled by the quarter notes, right? be fooled by that rhythm. That's a big melody, and if you're light on it, it'll be missed, right? I like that. It plays into. I like that bowing. Up, down, up, down. It breaks Mozart's slur, but I think it makes sense in the trajectory of what that line wants to do. It's giving you beat-em, beat-em. It's giving you that feeling very much on the downbeat. So we chose to change that bowing over time. You have mostly baseline stuff, and then this recap is kind of the second spot that gets called because it has both versions of the noodle, right? If you don't get the first page, you're going to get some version of this, right? So remembering your dynamic, you're going to start it loud, right? Sometimes they'll give you the half notes, and then, right? Think progressive scales. Right, there's your 3-note. Here's 3-note coming back, right? It's E, F sharp, G, and G, F sharp, E. Right, then you got the original noodle. Make sure you drop all the way back. Playing louder at first will mean you can drop back more, right? Right. And where is it? We have piano at the beginning, right? No, we have double piano. There are spots where he does piano and double piano next to each other. Always something to be careful of. So this one, it starts double piano and then it's single for some reason. Right, gives you the same thing. And then right at the bottom of the page, right, 156, don't be fooled by G sharp. Right? That G sharp comes out of nowhere and right can be really nasty. Other than that, this piece is only 4 minutes long, right? There's only so much trouble you can get into in 4 minutes. Everything coming back. And then the coda begins. We have a big part in the coda. If you look towards the end where you have, right? Most of the time, I know it's a Mozart thing, in orchestral recordings, you're going to hear a lot of trills there, starting from the bottom note, or, right, because that's the thing. In a solo piece, you would go, right, for this particular spot, I would give consideration to, right, just for the landmark of the harmony there. But that's one to keep in. If they say bring the whole movement, I would be really eager to call, right? That comes out of nowhere, and if you haven't looked at it, it can catch you. In a 4-minute piece, that's totally fair game, right? The stuff at the end. Good. Now let's move forward about 200 years to Strauss. Sorry, does anyone have any questions about stuff in the Figaro? That's most of the major highlights, but is there anywhere, does anyone have a fingering they like, or is there some part of the noodle that was giving you pause? Okay, let's move on to the Strauss.
Actually, I had a question.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't see.
So for the beginning, what I always like to do, I wonder if it was fine, is actually staying on the D string
Yes.
on the entire time, because I find the string crossing really hard to pull off.
Totally.
Smooth.
Yeah. So you were like, was it 2 1 1 2 4 or 2 1 2 2 4? One of those.
2 1 2 1 2 2 4.
2 4. Yeah, 2 2. Totally. And then yeah, totally. That eliminates that string crossing almost. Completely. It means you have to make more. It means you have to make those descending shifts really fast. That's pretty tough. I would practice 4 1 4 2 2. That's a lot of space to cover, and the 2 2 descending is less than ideal, but you have to do that anyway with the original, right? You're just a little bit closer to it. So you're trading the string crossing for a lot of downward shifting really quickly. But if it works, it works. Totally. Eliminating string crossings is always good. Yeah, I used to do it that way as well. As I got a bass that had a darker high string too, I didn't mind it so much, and I was able to pull it off. But you do hear it just a little, especially right over the bass. It's weird because everything we think when we play is based on how we process from right behind the bass, but things sound so much different when you're just 10 feet away that those little, sometimes things you think are no big deal are really weird, and things you think are really weird don't matter when you're a little further away. So if you think it's weird or you think the trade-off might be worth it, try recording them both and just see which one sounds better, right? If you go to the D string, can you hear the shifts? And do you not like the shifts more than you wouldn't have liked the open string, you know? But it totally works that way. So for the Strauss, something really good to keep in mind is that Strauss's favorite composer was Mozart, right? He was definitely interested in pushing tonality and pushing form past Beethoven to these really deep boundaries, but it was all contained within this mold of German music, which is what they thought of it at the time. You know, it doesn't age that well, but this idea of being in a lineage of German or Germanic composers that starts with Mozart or Bach, right, and ends with you, is a really powerful notion that got a lot of people very caught up in that for a long time. And this is a contributor to that vein of classical music, right? So processing it as if it's complex Mozart is a really great way to think about it, right? If this were Mozart, how would you look at the root movements in the bass, right? It's very Mozart, right? You have 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 7, 5, 1 to F, right? We're going to very logical places, right? So feeling these pillars, these big downbeats and these big long notes for what they are, because when you're playing long notes, you're really underpaying the harmony, right? This is part of the melody, yes, but it's a big chunk of harmony, right? And then as soon as you're here, you're contributing to a really thick harmonic texture, right? All of the other strings, has everyone tried this with a recording, right? The other strings are right. It's just as loud and as grating. You've got this motor going that's just supporting you, but all of these. It's all resonance and tone. If Mozart's orchestra had been enormous, it would be the tone you would make, right? If Mozart had an orchestra big enough to need 8 bass players playing loudly, it would be that, right? We're not into Shostakovich yet. We don't have those hard edges unless they're really written, right? All we have that sounds like Shostakovich is Sforzano, right? Is fast, slow in the bow. And we only get none of those. We don't have Sforzando in here, right? Everything is accents, but mostly tone, mostly big, wide tone and round edges, which is why this is so hard, right? We have to blend with the French horns. Good. So let me go slowly and show you what I did, meaning what I did and what I liked for me the last time that I played this excerpt. Because I feel like I've tried a million different things, and every time I prepare it, I seem to like something a little bit different, right? So first one, what's our first arpeggio? We have E flat major, right? E flat major 6. For me, always, second finger beats fourth finger all day. So I know 4 connects, but I hate this. I hate it, and I don't want to start an excerpt that I'm going to have to play a million times, playing my grossest string all the way over on the finger I hate the most, right? So I'm going to, right? As much as you can, connect into the next thing, save a little bow at the beginning, and spend out that weight at the end. Right, so your long note goes ba-da-da-da-da-dee-da and shoots out, and that long note projects into the run, right? Otherwise, you can get, right? It's exaggerated, right? But when the long note tapers, you lose all of that drive. You lose all of that. Right? In a big orchestra, you can get away with that. In an audition, it's becoming more and more not thought well of, right? If you can, get to a spot where you can hold that all in one. There's good news though, right? This is an 8-bar phrase. That's the end of bar 4 of an 8-bar phrase, which is where you would normally put a phrase marking, right? Ba, ba-da-da-da-da-dee-da, ba, ba-da-da-da-dee-da, ba, ba-da-da-da-dee-da. It's an 8-bar phrase, right? And that's the midpoint. It's a perfectly great place to put your breath mark. Take 3 full beats, take a nice fat retake, and get going on C minor, right? For the bar before that, I personally like to come across the string. 2, 2, 1, 4, harmonic. I'm not bothered by it. I don't feel like it's so fast, I never notice it. I like, if you save bow for it, it works. I've also been a fan of 1, 2, 1. If that E string doesn't sound good, that works great as well, right? Or, right, I used to do that, but it's a weird string crossing. 1, 4, 4. That was my first thought when I prepared it, but it's the worst idea. And it's an extra string crossing, and you have to tap with 4. It's less shifting technically, but it's awkward, so I would just not do it. Going into the, what is that, A flat 6, right? You have a lot of options. You can do the most sort of Simandl way to think about this is an arpeggio, or standard arpeggio finger, right? Start in first, and then how about 1, 1, 4, and then thumb 3, and then is where I go down. You can also come across, right? You run the risk of extra string crossing, but it's doable, right? Right, so that's option 1, coming straight across. Why is that? Why that works well, right? It's first position, third position, and then basically thumb position, right? Why is that less than ideal? Why is that fingering not the best? Where does it pose challenges?
A lot of shifts.
Yeah, it's a lot of shifts, and some of them are really gross, right? Which is the worst part of that? Yeah, how about 4 on C to thumb on E flat, right? Dee-dum, dee-dum. That's tough, right? So that's problem 1, right? If you're going to go the most obvious route, that's a lot of work, and you're always gonna hear it, right? I think at the end of the day, I've never seen a good fingering that didn't end with thumb 3, or at least thumb 2, right? I think that's a lie. I've seen thumb 4 work. Someone I know did something weird coming across, and they found a good excuse to use 4th finger. But that was one time, right? So given that you're going to end up, let's work backwards, right? So where would be a good way to come into thumb on there, right? You could come from over, right? What does that give us? How about, right? Right, you can come over. Then you start to be running into problems with, right? Yay, nobody wants to see that, right? There is a good sort of compromise fingering that uses the thumb, right? The one that I've seen be the most effective is using the thumb to make your perfect 4th a smaller shift. So the one that I saw that works the best, especially Brian, if you have the C open at the beginning, first finger C, and then thumb 2, 1. That part works for everybody, but the C sounds extra good if you have the extension, right? And then thumb 2, 1, thumb 3, right? That's an option as well. It's a lot less, and it's worth it because you don't have this jerky motion in the left hand. It's very, right? It's a lot more, and it gets rid of 4 thumb and replaces it with either 1 thumb or 2 thumb, which is a lot more accessible, right? Works quite well. So you have C, E flat, A flat is the sticking point there. So it just depends on where you're putting the difficult part. It has to go somewhere, and they all are hard, right? So you have a bunch of different decisions there. You get into, let's talk bowing for this next part, right? I change there and go up, down. It's slightly different than what's written in, but, and then I have a figure that works quite well for this. As you get to the high E flat, get to the E flat with 2, bring out thumb, thumb 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And it gets you ready to launch into thumb position earlier with a lot more authority, right? 2, thumb 1, 2, 1, 2, and then you can play the harmonic and then vibrate, or just hit it if you get really confident. Right? And then replace here. Right? That's the feeling you want. 100% you want to be up bow. That's the move, right? So in your scale practice, fast bow quarters, bum ba ba bum ba ba bum, right? That's what you need to really put the spice into. Right? Together. Same at the tip and at the frog is really challenging, right? Takes a long time, right? Getting nice and heavy out to the end there, right? Then you get the trill, right? Don't read too much into the trill, right? Try to, in an audition, always read the top line. Romantic music, we begin the trill from the bottom note. And then I like 2 here because it allows you to use your same fingering. Brian, if you have the extension, 2, 1, 1, just like you would normally. Or if you have an extension that'll do it. And then, I don't know, when mine's a little sticky and I don't feel great about that, so I go for, and also it sounds better with the vibrato. Yeah, flip it up, it works. It works as long as you don't hear, as long as you don't hit the thing. Yes, and then this dotted figure, we haven't gotten to it, right? But ba-yada has to be really big and full, right? So like right 1, 2, 3 before 12, right? When we get the low. 2, 3, right? If you do what you do in Mozart, 90% of the time, it'll sound, and that's right in Mozart, but it won't work in Strauss in general, and in this piece specifically, because what this should be really is, right, it should be connected by up the string, right, because that's the original strain of the melody, right? Think a horn connecting it with a gliss or a cello up the string, right? Really lyrical, and you'll be on the right track. Every time you see this dotted figure, it's all over the battle scene. It's on the first page. If you listen to the recording and start listening to it in a good one, they're going to go for it for all it's worth. Especially, this isn't the best one because it's a fifth, right? The other one is a fifth too. In the melody, you're going to get a lot of sevenths, right? Which are the more expressive interval to do that with. Strauss does it all over the place in this piece. It's motivic, so make sure that your dotted note is super duper long as you can make it, without going out of time. And then the C minor one works much the same way, right? I like half position, right? Because then you just octave E flat. Right? And you can go from there. Make sure you have a plan to get down to this low A flat. Right? It can go bad really quickly. It's hard. I like 1-1. Right? If you get called for more, make sure you get ready for big up bows, right? Is how they're going to bow that every time. Those are basically the broad strokes of what you're going to look at when you're doing this, right? Does anybody have any questions or something I didn't get over all the way?
Yeah, one thing I was wondering about trill, my teacher told me about like the 3. Okay, or
If you can get it in tune, yeah. It's whatever will let your hand be hitting the notes with the least amount of tension. Honestly, it's counter to what both my teacher at CIM, Max Dimoff, and what Jeff enjoyed. And they both have told me that they didn't like it as much. But the tension trill has actually worked quite well for me over the years. If you work and if you're very diligent about being able to use it and then get rid of it immediately without having that lingering tension in your arm, it can be a good tool once in a while. It's also helpful if you want to get a trill between 2 and 4, right? Does everyone know what I mean by kind of locking, being a little bit more stiff in the hand, and then basically doing vibrato, right? Try it in a scale sometime. So that you're forcing yourself to be tense on the trill and then loose in the shift, so that you practice immediately getting rid of that tension, which is the most important thing, right? If it's something that adds tension into your playing, you should never do it, right? But using it once in a while, right? I personally think that sounds better. They hear it and they hear that you're doing the tension trill, and I have a suspicion that it's because they can hear that you're doing it. That being said, they can hear that you're doing it, I suppose. I mean, slightly slower might work, and if your hands get stronger or faster than mine, you can probably do it faster anyway. My trills aren't all that fast in the first place. Does that kind of answer your question? Right? You have a lot of options. Just the goal is to get the tension out, essentially. All right, let's go to the weirdest one for sure. Shostak 5. Again, if you see Shostakovich 5 and it says prepare Shostakovich 5, go to the library, get the part, and that's now the first thing that's on your list, right? If it's all of Shostakovich 5, that's the trap, and that's where they're coming to get you. Because Shostakovich 5 is big and long and complicated, and it never ends. But it's amazing, you should all love it, So, what makes the style of Shostakovich different from Mozart and Strauss?
Like you kind of, I can see like pretty much every note's accented.
Yes. What else? What makes the language different? Right? Why would you hear this on the radio and immediately think that it was not German? Or essentially that you're like, oh, this is definitely not Mozart.
Maybe it's shorter in general.
Mm-hmm. Not just the articulation, but anything about it, right? Anything about how it's put together. Why would you, if everything was taken off, you took off all the words, if someone handed you this part, you'd be like, this isn't Mozart. Right? You'd be like, I don't know what this is, but it's not from there, right? How come?
Harmony thing?
Yeah, harmonies are way, way different, right? We're looking at that as well, right? So what do we have? We have no key signature, which is probably in any music after 1950 should be an immediate tip-off that there is going to be some element of atonality going on, or that you're using non-standard harmony in some way, right? C major is what you do when you're like, I'll just change everything as I go, right? And that's exactly what's happening here. Take a look at this scale, right? This is in the Shostakovich, right at the end before 23. Right? What is that?
Hold on, scale.
Exactly, right? Even division of the octave and semitones, right? Shostakovich loved these. Russian composers in general, the French, Debussy, you'll see whole tone scales all over the place. Not German, right? They don't do that, really. The other scale that Shostakovich is really well known for, does anybody? Not just whole tone scales, but another sort of mixed scale. Almost. Another even way, how else? There are two chords in harmony that evenly divide the octave. What's a chord that evenly divides the 12-tone octave? Into four.
Diminished.
Right, fully diminished seventh chord. Right? If we take a fully diminished 7 and then make those the units of our scale, does anyone know what you can start to
I forget what
generate?
it's called, but it's the thing where it's like whole step, half step, whole step, half
Mm-hmm.
step, whole step.
Yeah, we call that an octatonic scale, right? So it's an alternating whole and half steps, right? So start on A, half step, B flat, whole step, C, half step, D flat, whole step, E flat, half step, F flat, G flat, A double flat, right? And now we have to go around the back because we've hit A again, right? So you're basically breaking the octave down into diminished chords. I believe there are only 3 octatonic scales, because you can go whole step, half step, you can go half step, whole step, or you can move it by one transposition, and everything else, like diminished chords, is just different flavors of the same octatonic scale, right? There aren't great examples of it in this little chunk, but it's all over Shostakovich when you start looking. Anytime you're playing Tchaikovsky, Shostakovich, things like that, you're in a neutral key signature, you start seeing flats and sharps in the same keys, in the same bars all the time. Start looking for those patterns that are, right, those octatonic patterns, and you'll start to see them everywhere. And you'll start to see that weird diminished harmony as being a lot different than what you'll see in a lot of German pieces, right? They use it as more of the bread and butter than as the flavoring, right? Let's start with how these longer notes get accented, right? At the beginning, first off, every single note you play in Shostakovich should be shorter than its equivalent in Strauss. It should be shorter and punchier, right? Whereas if you saw empty quarter notes in Strauss, you might, right? In Shostakovich, it's gonna be, right? That's nothing. That's an unaccented note. In Shostakovich, in Stravinsky, right? Think Pulcinella, right? That's Shostakovich, right? Those notes have dots on them, right? They're just saying short. It's a quarter note with a rest and a dot, and you get, right? So that's your point, right? From there, the accent is actually broadening those notes. So see that as starting with and broadening, right? It's maximum power, as much as you can pull out of the bass before you start to overplay, right? That's your basic, right? That's forte. Get as much as you can get in, right? Scott Dixon, who was one of the bass players in the Cleveland Orchestra, had a bow grip that he would just use for excerpts like this, that he literally would call the communist bow grip, because it was best for this late Russian romantic music. And instead of this, you take all the springiness out of the bow and just do this, right? He's playing this whole thing, thumb sort of in, just right? The surface noise is around you here, right? Also, you play it better. Right? Now you're in Shostakovich land, right? You get 8 people doing that all together. It sounds amazing, right? And it's just big and loud and muscular and punchy, right? That's basically every time you get anything a quarter note or longer, that's the basis, right? Coming down these runs, I actually like to flip this bowing backwards. I'll take that low B flat down bow and go. If you were in class, if you had me last semester, just like, right? But gorilla-fied, right? Right? As big and angry as you can make that, right? It also works, if you have the extension, also works going down. Right where those notes, right? If you're coming up, I like coming up the E string, and then 1 4 1 4 1 works nicely for me. I feel like crossing over for just the one note means that even if you get right, that last note is going to be good, right? You're going to get a D every time, more or less. As long as you get the right number of attacks, kind of like in Heldenleben when you have, right? As long as you get the right number of clicks in there, you can make that rhythm pop out. If you have a nice clear C, D in there, it's going to work great, right? Then we get back, this stuff at the beginning is from the very opening of the symphony, right? 1, 2, 3, more. Right? Immediately back, double forte to as much tone as you can pull, right? Right? For here, I like 1, 3, because if you can get those octave E flats, that allows you to have a much higher degree of connection than going, or if you want to be adventurous, right? If you hear some of that shift, no one's going to miss it. There's a couple spots where you can hear the shift, and that's one of them, but boy is it dangerous. I would not recommend it for an audition, right? There's just no reason. Yes. hold that note super long. It's an easy elimination for thank you, right? It's just too long, right? Come right off on beat 2, touch it, don't go past the end of 2, right? That's a really quick, that's one that the non-bass players are like, you in the corner, just listen for this, you know? And they'll just pick people out. It's just a little detail that they get you on. Another good way to get connection, since you just came down and you're here, I like this fingering. Either thumb 1 or thumb 2 for the B's. It's optional, but I think it gets you set up. Right? 2 thumb, tiny little shift, right? You're going over the rest of your hand, which is not ideal, but it's tiny, so. Right? And then from there on out, you're pretty much good to go. Just as big as you can. That shift you can hear, right? If you can save here and get down, right? Just as much as you can fill the bass up, right? At that point, you're going to start overplaying, right? There's some point at which you just crank it as much as you can get out, and it won't be too much. You're blending with like 50 other strings, trombones, snare drum, triangle, it's all happening, right, at this point. Everything's happening as much as it can, right? So just as much as you can get out. I must have missed something. Does anyone have any questions about anywhere in here?
I have a question. What fingering do you recommend for the measure 22 if you don't have an extension? Like,
either. Let's see. Can you take? Fine. Maybe either take the whole thing out. How does that look? Either take the whole thing out, which is fun, right? Because the cellos, now that I mention it, I don't know if the cellos have it too, but they probably do. You know, in which case you're golden. You just don't have an extension, right? I wouldn't feel the need to go like right and jump down. If it's feasible to do the whole thing up an octave, just do that. It'll sound better anyway, right? This is hard. I'm lucky enough to get and get the D. And I'm like, oh, that was good. You know, if it's up an octave, you can do it way easier. So if you can, sure. I want to say there was. Something about this makes me think I had a friend who started this oboe. And would do that, right? And we get going so you could have both. But he would start. And basically do that, right? Sorry, it's out of tune. But, that's basically what you're going for, right? If you find recordings, a lot of recordings you find will add tempo 4 bars after 25, right? Bum 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 digga-dum 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 digga-da da da da. A lot of recordings will do that. If they haven't already added that tempo somewhere before, it can really come on a lot there. If you're taking a big audition with somewhere a little bit bigger, who won't know that it's not a mistake, that's a good place to step on the gas one more level if you want to, right? If you get good at that, it's good to imagine there's a really good cue in the orchestra part if you get used to hearing it. You can just increase by a click or two, and the people who know what they're talking about will understand. I wouldn't do it for a super regional orchestra where they don't perform this regularly, but if it's somewhere where you can, contribute and have it be meaningful, I guess. If it's somewhere where they know what they're talking about, I would do that. All right? So does anyone have any other questions? Okay, well, in that case, let's get started. I know this time I think we're going to run over it. Just there's not much we can do. Let's try to go as quick as we can. Would anybody like to go first? Brian, let's go 1, 2, and then everybody else try to jump in the deck and work it out among yourselves. Right? So, in any order you feel, yeah, come on over. I set the camera up, so. So we're going to go Brian, Josh. Who would like to go next? Brian, Josh, Cole, Savannah. I'm so sorry. Can you remind me? Kevin. Kevin, Zach, and Garrett. I got one. It takes me forever. I'm really sorry. I'm terrible with names. It's going to happen, but it's going to take me a while. I'm really sorry. It's completely my fault, and I know it's bad, but I'm trying my best.